Hi everyone, I'm Rachel McAllister. I'm one of the actors at Pitlochry Festival Theatre, and today I am continuing our Writers Through the Ages. We're going to zoom over to Russia in the mid-1800s and a Mr. Anton Chekhov. So you might have heard of Chekov already, you might have read some of his works, or you might have studied him at school or college or university. So today I'm just going to give you a brief history of his life and works and talk a little bit about how he has impacted theatre and also acting as we know it today. So, he was born in 1860 in Russia and is now considered to be one of the greatest writers of short fiction in history. So this might be surprising because he's so well known for his plays, but actually his short stories are really well received. He's also considered as one of the seminal figures of the birth of early modernism in the theatre, so he's had a really big impact upon the whole industry. Although he had a great writing career, he also was trained in medicine and he practiced as a doctor for his whole life. So as a young man, his family was actually declared bankrupt, and that meant that they spent several years living in poverty in Moscow. So when he got a bit older, he became financially responsible for his family. And whilst he was also training to be a doctor, he started writing short humorous sketches and vignettes about contemporary Russian life, and then he sold them to newspapers and magazines. So he gained a good reputation from doing this and managed to make a living for his family. And if you read those sketches today, you might actually not recognise the writing as a work of Chekhov because the style was much harsher than that of his later works and is almost unrecognisable. So he qualified as a physician, but he kept writing, and he would write for newspapers, and then he eventually graduated into the kind of bigger leagues. So the biggest newspapers, the most prestigious newspapers wanted his work. They paid him more money, they gave him more space, and this eventually led to him branching into writing kind of more formal short stories. And these short stories attracted attention. People in the literary world thought they were fantastic. So eventually in 1887 he was commissioned to write his first play by a theatre manager, and this ended up being Ivanov. This was written within a fortnight and it was performed shortly after, so the whole process was very short and very fast, but the play was a huge success and it received a lot of praise for being really original, but Chekhov was like totally bemused because he thought the whole process had been an absolute fiasco. Little did he know that this play would pave the way for his future works and success. So he made a good success as a writer, and from the success he bought a small estate south of Moscow, and he used his money and his status to provide for his local community. So there was an outbreak of famine and cholera in 1892, and he organised relief for his community to help them out when this happened. He built 3 schools, he built a fire station, and he built a clinic in the area. He would then provide free medical care for the poor people who lived in his community, and so he would travel for miles to visit sick people and he would give them medicine for free. He would provide them with health care that they wouldn't have access to. Sometimes he would wake up in the morning and go outside and there'd be a line outside his door of people just really hoping that they could see a doctor. So although this limited his writing time, his medical work actually brought him really close to all sections of Russian society, and this provided a really good basis for him for ideas for characters or plots or devices. It provided just like so a wealth of information that he could mine. So as well as helping the poorer people in his community, he still visited the upper classes as well to provide medical care, and he famously recorded in his notebook saying, "Aristocrats, the same ugly bodies and physical uncleanliness, the same toothless old age and disgusting death as with market women." So you can see that his view on people were that they were just people. So during this time where he was living on this estate, he wrote the Seagull. And although we know that is a really famous play, it was originally a complete bust, and the actors were booed off the stage, everyone hated it, and it led to Chekhov renouncing the theatre, saying it was terrible, he never wanted to do it again, and he was never going to write another play. Thankfully, this was changed in 1898 because a theatre practitioner called Konstantin Stanislavski, say that again, Rachel, Konstantin Stanislavski, he directed a new production of the play for the Moscow Art Theatre. And this was received as an absolute triumph. It was revolutionary the way that they put this play on. So Stanislavski is now a really, really famous theatre practitioner, and people follow his toolkit all over the world to this day. And his reworking of Chekhov's text really brought out the subtlety of the writing, and this restored Chekhov's interest in playwriting. So the Moscow Art Theatre commissioned more plays from him, and within a year they staged Uncle Vanya. So these plays and his subsequent plays really put into place the fundamentals of acting that we practice to this day. So what they did was they expressed the realism of how people actually speak to each other, and they translated it onto stage to try and show the human condition as accurately as they could. And they hoped that in doing that, it would make their audience reflect and see what their definition of what it means to be human is. So Chekhov also believed that the role of an artist was to ask questions and not to answer them. So he never apologised for any unanswered questions in his work, or any thoughts or feeling of unknown or being left hanging at the end of a play. He never apologised for that because he thought it was his job to provoke questions in his audience. So his influence on acting stems from his use of subtext. So we'll go back to Stanislavski again. He famously said that Chekhov often expressed his thought not in speeches, but in pauses or between the lines, or in replies consisting of a single word. The characters often feel and think things not expressed in the lines they speak. So this was a kind of new way of writing almost, that you had to read between the lines as an actor, as an audience member, to see what was going on in the full picture. So his writing often then presented a challenge to the acting ensembles as well as to the audiences, because in place of conventional action, Chekhov created what was called a theatre of mood and submerging life in the text. So it wouldn't be as straightforward as this is where the plot twists and this is where it's going and this is where it's leading. It was more about creating a snapshot of real life. So this notion of subtextual drama has ended up influencing generations of playwrights, of actors, of theatre practitioners all around the world. There are so many institutions of acting and theatre companies whose works are directly influenced by Chekhov's style of writing and his plays. So one of Chekhov's most notable dramatic principles is something that we refer to as Chekhov's gun. So this is the idea that every single element in a narrative must be necessary and irreplaceable, and everything else should be removed. So Chekhov wrote a lot of letters. He was in a long distance marriage in his life, and so they conversed via letters, and he would often communicate his ideas and the way he was thinking through those letters. So these are lifted directly from his letters in the definition of Chekhov's gun. So he said, "Remove everything that has no relevance to the story. If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there." And then in a subsequent letter he wrote, "One must never place a loaded rifle on the stage. If it isn't going to go off, it's wrong to make promises you don't mean to keep." So that is the principle of Chekhov's gun. So that's just a bit of history about Chekhov and his works, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on Chekhov's gun. Would you place a loaded gun on stage and not let it go off? Do you think that's interesting, or do you think that it must go off? I'd love to know. And I will see you soon.